And I answered it, and it's a senior corporate officer from the Polaroid company. You know the instant photography stuff? Well, this guy here, he calls me up and he goes, "John, I've been following your career. I remember when you were on Celebrity Magazine. I remember your papers when you were in Washington. I remember," thinking stalker at this point. And he goes, "Let's have lunch." So I told 6 people where I was going, when I'd come home, and I went and I had lunch with the guy, and on the spot he offers me a job to head exploratory research for Polaroid. I say, "Dude, I'm a medicinal chemist, I'm going into academia." He says, "Oh, well, I was going to pay you this much." I said, "When do I start?" And all of a sudden now I'm an industrial chemist. Who knows? I had a great group of people working with me, and I started to crank out patents after patents. I have patents on holography, patents on fiber optics, patents on medical diagnostics, and I started inventing all this stuff. And one of the things I invent is this concept called non-covalent derivatization. I'm not going to kill you on this. If you wanted me to go into chemistry, I promise you I could go overboard here. But what what would a medicinal chemist do at Polaroid? A medicinal chemist would look at how do molecules behave in natural systems, right? In nature, right, we do amazing things. The molecules in nature are phenomenally elegant. Yet humans, when we do chemical manufacturing, what do? We heat things up to high temperature, we put them under high pressure, we use all these nasty reagents, and yet nature does everything at room temperature, ambient pressure, using water as a solvent. So I started to say, why can't I take the way molecules behave in nature and apply those principles to how to manufacture products in industry? And I called it non-covalent derivatization. My license plate of my car is actually NCD for non-covalent derivatization. Unless one of my kids wants to borrow it, then it's no can do. But essentially now there's like these journals, Crystal Engineering, Crystal Growth and Design, that have started. Really all it is it's a technology that controls how molecules dissolve in films. Okay, so it's not that fancy of a thing, it's just a kinetically controlled process to exactly how would, and what I modeled it after actually was glycogen in liver cells. Like glucose is stored in our liver cells as glycogen molecules. And so here was a molecule that when you push the shutter button on a Polaroid instant photograph, we wanted to control the way it released. And so I mimicked the way glycogen releases in bodies, and I put it in the manufacturing process of Polaroid. So that was it. And I called it non-covalent derivatization. The photographic industry actually started calling these things Warner complexes. So that's kind of weird to have a complex named after you. But one time I was in Japan giving a big green chemistry talk, and Fuji is a big photographic company in Japan. They asked me to come and give a talk. When I went there, I thought they wanted to talk about green chemistry. But what they actually wanted me to talk about was Warner complexes. And these guys, they were so excited. They brought me to the research lab, and they showed all these bottles. And in their research lab, Warner complex, X-23B, Warner complex 77-6. They were so proud. They said, this is the John Warner of the Warner complex. The look of disappointment on their faces when they met me, but oh well. But it's really strange the way things work. But very interesting thing happened. To go to manufacturing in the United States, you can't just say, I'm going to manufacture a product. You have to get EPA approval. And we had to get the stuff, we had to show how these Warner complexes worked, and we had to get what was called a low volume exemption and a pre-manufacturing notification. These are technical documents. And so we do this pile of paperwork this high, send it to Washington, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And after a couple months, the EPA rejected the application. Not because of toxicity, not because of the environment. They said, non-covalent derivatization, what is this guy talking about? Is he crazy? Small particles, is he crazy? Molecular complexes, is he high? They had no idea what I was talking about, so Polaroid stuck me on an airplane and flew me to Washington, D.C. to give a seminar on Warner complex. This is the first time in my life I'd been on an airplane. I'm holding a briefcase full of overhead transparencies. It was before these projectors and stuff. I'm a little bit scared, a little bit nervous. I'm going to go talk to the EPA about my invention. And I go and I meet the branch chief of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, this guy named Paul Anastas. All right, I recognize this guy. Remember the kid that I followed into the research lab when I was a music major at UMass? It was him. I've known this kid since I was 11 years old from Quincy. You know, I played in a jazz band with his older brother. His older brother played saxophone. There's me on keyboard. My older brother with awesome hair. We could talk to him, and I could say, wait a minute. We used to manufacture this process with all these nasty reagents and all these things, and we've worked on a new aqueous, non-toxic technology. Why am I at the EPA begging your permission? Shouldn't you be happy that we've invented an environmentally benign process? Well, you know, no one ever thought of it that way. Really think about this. This is like 1991, 1992. Pollution prevention is just starting to be talked about. And people are talking about measuring pollution, monitoring pollution, characterizing pollution. Here I am, a synthetic chemist working in industry, and I invented a technology that was safe in the first place. Does that happen? Do the Dows and the DuPonts of the world do that? Come to think of it, they don't. Why? And so me and my friend came up with this concept called green chemistry to describe the process of making things safe in the first place. And the week that I was there in Washington, the Clinton and Gore administration announced a new program called Reinventing Government. So Paul and I, you know, it was kind of one of these things where there was a lot of waste in government. The federal government was always publishing all these stories about people buying, you know, $1 hammers for $75,000, all this waste. And so Paul and I said, let's start a program around green chemistry. And what we did is we started what's now called the Presidential Green Chemistry Challenge Award. We asked companies across the country to demonstrate their technologies were safe. And this thing, you know, so here's probably the most important thing I'm going to say to you about green chemistry. There are 3 requirements for green chemistry. One is that the technology has to be environmentally better than an existing technology. But the second thing is it's got to actually work. People got to be willing to buy the product. So it has to perform good, and it also has to be the right cost. If it's too expensive or if it's a lousy technology, people won't use it. So only if you have all 3 of them do you actually have something called green chemistry. Well, this program started in 1996, survived transition from the Clinton administration to the Bush administration to the Obama administration. It's been going now for 15 years. Every year, 5 companies get these awards. Well, Paul and I immediately upon starting this, we said, you know, we should probably write a book. Now, we wrote this book, and I got to tell you, the moment this book came out, I feel like that guy Forrest Gump in the movie. All of a sudden, this book gets translated into 15 different languages. In the last 5 years, I've gone to over 30 countries meeting presidents and prime ministers talking about this book. I promise you, if I thought anyone was ever going to read this book, we would have written a better book. But what we wrote was this book about green chemistry, and we talked about the 12 principles of green chemistry, which speak to scientists. Like I said, it's been crazy going all around the world. I got to go back to my life story for a second, because this is the most important part that's probably relevant to your lives. All right? So at this point in my life, I'm working at Polaroid. I started this field called green chemistry. I'm approaching it from an intellectual perspective, thinking, well, it makes smart business sense. Something horrible happened. And about this point in my life, my 2-year-old son, John, died. He was born with a birth defect called biliary atresia. Okay? The reason that I brag about all my papers, look at me, I was on Celebrity Magazine, I was, got all these awards. Imagine how awesome I felt the night of my son's funeral, asking myself, I wonder if something that I worked with caused my son's birth defect. As a chemist working in a chemistry lab, I wonder if something that I touched caused my son's death. So staring at the ceiling at night, I said, something's wrong. I'm familiar with books like Our Stolen Future that talk about chemicals in the environment. I'm probably the most successful chemist my age on the planet. I'd synthesized over 2,500 new molecules. And I never had a course in toxicology. I never had a course in environmental mechanisms. How could I be such a successful industrial chemist and have no idea what makes a molecule toxic?